everyone, Alexa Donne here, and today I'm coming at you with some harsh editing advice. This was special requested by some viewers, so here I am with 7 bits of tough love for when you are editing your book. It's a common misconception that writing is simply writing. So much of writing is editing. I find that a lot of writers half-ass editing or don't take it nearly as seriously as they should, so here I am to hit you with some harsh realities. My first bit of harsh advice about editing is that if all you're doing is doing a brush pass on your writing, you're focusing on the prose, on grammar, spelling, etc., and you just go through the manuscript or pay someone to go through the manuscript and think you're done, you failed at editing. Editing isn't simply editing. We also use the word revision interchangeably for editing, but revision is really its own separate thing. Revision is digging into your manuscript and actually making substantive changes. That is really what editing a book means. You're going to do all the rest as well. You are going to do the brush pass, you're going to look at the prose, you want it to be as clean as possible. But simply cleaning up a manuscript is not actually editing it for story and craft. So basically, if you're not editing for story and craft, you're not really editing your book. The second bit of harsh editing advice that I know is gonna piss off a lot of people, I feel if you are in a spot where you must hire an editor, have an external editor to clean up and fix your work, and you literally cannot function without them. This is actually beyond the developmental stuff. This is that prose line-based stuff. If you need another person to basically go through and make you sound coherent, you are not equipped to be a professional writer. You are not ready for prime time if you must pay or go to someone else to do it for you. Self-editing is an essential skill that every writer must have. You don't have to know everything, you certainly don't have to go to school for it, and we all do work with editors to work on our work. But you must be reasonably self-sufficient as a writer so that you could write something and turn it into your agent or your editor, and they're not getting a grease fire because you didn't have the time or the funds to spend thousands of dollars on someone else to make your writing work on the page. This is one of many reasons why I do discourage writers from hiring freelance editors if in hiring those freelance editors they are trying to cover up deficiencies in their writing. You can absolutely brush up on your own skills and learn to self-edit. It's an essential skill, and I think that those who can't, they're just not gonna make it in the long term. The first time you turn in a book to your editor/agent and they realize that the previous work you've given them is essentially not quite your actual work, you're gonna have a problem. And the third bit of harsh advice ties into this, and it's not about paying a professional. This one's about critique partners, what they actually are and what they can and can't and should and shouldn't do for you. So similarly, if you are relying on or expecting any beta reader or critique partner to hold your hand like your book mommy and fix it for you, again, that's an unrealistic expectation. It is no beta reader or critique partner's job, or really even your agent's job, to take something that's and clean it up so that you sound coherent and good at writing. That is not their job. Seriously, you need to work on yourself to learn how to edit yourself. No one has to be perfect, but it's just incredibly critical for anyone who seriously wants to be a writer to learn enough, develop enough, practice enough that you can stand on your own 2 feet. Help is fine, but you shouldn't be expecting anyone else to do it for you. The fourth bit of harsh advice is the classic killing your darlings, but specifically I'm here to tell you, no single line, word, turn of phrase, paragraph is so singularly beautiful and brilliant and perfect that you can't cut it if it's not serving the story. The harsh advice here is that you have to be harsh with yourself. Get over your ego, stop jerking yourself off about how great you sound on the page, and if it's not working, it's not working. You have to toughen up and learn to be efficient in your editing. If you're not willing to be tough on yourself, again, the story is going to suffer. You'll end up in a cycle where maybe at best you're annoying critique partners who are reading your work and finding continually that you're just not improving. This isn't just prose, of course, this is also having the chutzpah, the guts to change major story elements when needed. But at best you're annoying that critique partner who's like, they just don't learn, they're not teachable, they're really stubborn, they never change. But at worst, you're pissing off an agent, you're pissing off an editor the agent might drop you, the editor could cancel your book contract. It's incredibly critical to develop that tough love on yourself to properly and effectively edit. Don't be too precious about anything you've written and think that everything that you write is just a staggering work of genius, that it doesn't need any changes. The fifth piece of harsh editing advice is all about crutch words. You have them, trust me, we all do. It might vary what yours are. Mine are things like using the word just too often. Generally, I definitely have an adverb problem. And going back to the same well of reactions like laughing, smiling, sighing, nodding. And what you have to do at some point when you're doing an editing pass on your manuscript is be brutal with yourself, kind of laugh at those crutch words and phrases that you are using, and then you have to go through your manuscript and cut at least minimum half of them. If you can, do 2/3. You need to have that discipline to go through and really take yourself to task on that repetition, on the things that you go back to over and over and over again. Challenge yourself to be a better writer and essentially not be so lazy. It's fine being lazy in a draft. I encourage being lazy in a draft to get through it. But when you're editing, the buck stops here. If you go too light and easy on yourself, your manuscript is going to suffer. The point of editing is to make real substantive changes to make a book better. The sixth piece of harsh editing advice, this is more like kind of tough love reality check. And I will concede we don't live in a perfect world. I haven't even been able to always adhere to this, but I'm gonna say it just because you need to hear it. People ask all the time about this. And the reality is, it doesn't matter how good you are as a writer or as an editor or how committed you are to editing properly. At the end of the day, the best thing you can do is give yourself time away from your manuscript. It should be more time than you want to leave, than you think you need. I'm gonna say minimum of 6 months distance from a manuscript realistically to allow yourself the emotional distance so that when you go back in, you are actually willing to do the work that needs to be done and make the changes that need to be done. You don't want to rush through the editing process, though it is tempting, and yes, I have done it, but time and time again, the reality is any single manuscript that I've been able to take minimum 6 months break on, and then I've come back to it to do a real developmental revision, that has time and time again been the revision that made the biggest difference, that made the book what it became and actually made it good. Whereas I definitely have projects where I just didn't have that time, sometimes beyond my control, but sometimes it's rushing. So please do not rush your edits. It's hard to resist, but give yourself time away from your book. Otherwise, inevitably, it's probably going to be a sloppier revision than it otherwise would be if you gave yourself that time. And last but definitely not least, the seventh bit of harsh editing advice. This one is a doozy. This is actually almost harsh writing advice or harsh publishing advice, but it needs to be said. Some books simply cannot be edited into a publishable state, into a good state. It doesn't matter how many times you go back to it, how much time you leave. Some books are just never going to make it. This can be for a variety of reasons. The premise itself can be flawed. There can be an inherent issue with the structure, and you'd have to start from scratch to fix it. But even then, if it's the inherent flaw in the premise, You could simply not be leveled up enough to get the story where it needs to be. You would have needed to have been at a higher level to write it in the first place, and continually editing it just is never going to get it where it needs to be. Essentially what this means is editing just can't save some books, and you have to put those books away. You have to shelve them. I hesitate to use the word give up, but it's more that you have to move on, because then through the process of drafting and editing a new project, you're going to be leveling up and learning new skills, because editing at the end of the day, just like writing, is a skill set that you're developing over time. And every time that you go and approach a new thing, you're learning new things. And if all you're doing is returning to the well of the same story over and over and over and over again, using the same editing tactics, really working over the same prose over and over and over again, it's ineffective. I've also seen people literally break their books with too much editing. Gosh, I should have just done 8 bits of harsh advice, but we'll roll this in here. It's true. You can over-edit a book and basically ruin your book with too much editing. And the best thing for you is to set it aside and move on. Editing can be magic, but it's not actually a magic fix to all things, all books, all stories, all writers. Results may vary. So that's some harsh editing advice for you. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know down below in the comments. Do you suffer from any of these things with editing? Are there bits of harsh editing advice you like to give to yourself or to others that I've left out? And give this video a thumbs up if you like it. I'll try to put my kind of stern hat on more often to give you some tough love for writing and editing and publishing. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, guys, well, in this case, happy editing!